Hi YouTube, I'm Anna, and today marks like the 1 year anniversary of me finishing the Foxhole Court, the All for the Game series, if you will. And I, in July, made a video reviewing it, but I'm going to take it down for multiple reasons. And so on the 1 year anniversary of finishing The Kingsmen, I'm refilming my review. So first things first, I did not enjoy these books. They were bad. Second of all, there's just spoilers from beginning to end, so if you don't want any spoilers, or if you don't want to listen to me trash your favorite books, I wouldn't watch this video. Anyway, what's important is that they weren't all bad, they were just overall, there's very little to them. I've got a bunch of notes that I took in June. We're just gonna go and literally redo the video. So the Foxhole Court, or the All for the Game series, are books by Nora. They are the Foxhole Court, the Raven King, and the Kingsmen. They are in that order. People think the covers are really ugly, but I actually really enjoy the covers. They are self-published. I think that's really neat. Foxhole Court is a reasonable length. This book's pretty chunky, but it's also took me a long time, but it's pretty short. This book is 500 pages long. This book is 400 pages long, which is too many pages. They are about a group or a team of children, college students, who play a made-up sport called aftg, which I have never been able to understand. I kind of envisioned it as lacrosse, but on ice skates, and I don't really understand why I think it's on ice skates. That's just the way that I envisioned it, but it's essentially just indoor lacrosse. I don't know that much about hockey or lacrosse, but I don't think you can combine them without them just taking on the characteristics of one sport. Are these not just lacrosse sticks? I read these books. I read them of my own free will. They are in the same book circle as the Raven Cycle. I read them, and my friends, they were raving about them, and I gotta be honest, I was really disappointed that I didn't like them. I just found the whole thing to be unrealistic and boring. I hated Neil most of all, and the way that Andrew's character was handled it's messy. Books are what they are, and we can't really ask people to do much more than their best. And if their best is messy, then their best is messy. And I think that if a book has other merits, messy representation is it's just one of the things about the book. Anyway, I give the whole series a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the Foxhole Court 3 stars, and I think it's still at 3 stars, but it's now been like 2 years since I've read it. So that's why we really film reviews way after we finish. Raven King, probably 2.5 stars, and The Kingsmen I gave 2 stars. These books are pitched as like gay sports books, but they're not really. Maybe people want them to be, or think that they're a little bit more nuanced, new adult gay sports books, but again, I don't know about it. The romance, of course, is between Andrew and Neil, and that happens, I'm gonna say, like 3/4 of the way through the last book. Anyway, I wrote this review into 3 sections: the good, the bad, the ugly, in some attempt to start a series on this channel of book reviews in which I would break all book reviews into good, bad, and ugly, where the ugly is like bad things that make me really uncomfortable. They're not like technical errors, they're like things I don't like. This book's got a lot of ugly. There's just basically a list of characters I liked. But so, because we're gonna start with the good, we're always gonna start out with strengths. I liked Kevin. He was originally on their rival team, the Ravens, and he's got a fucking tattoo carved into his face because he's fucking metal. He is the only character I feel any sympathy for. Kevin really walks the line of being like having a tragic backstory and being a character who could exist in real life. But Kevin is an asshole, but he kind of knows he's an asshole. He doesn't pretend that he's really not an asshole at any point. He treats his teammates like shit, but he kind of also knows that he treats his teammates like shit, and he really just wants to escape this goddamn life that he's made for himself. And also, he loves Exy, and I think those two character traits, like, conflicting in him, are really well done in Kevin. Okay, so I said it better in my earlier review, but I think what makes Kevin likable where other characters are not is that Kevin's reactions to things are normal. They're within like what a normal person would do or say if they were in his position. But like other characters don't do that, and then they attack Kevin for having almost exactly the same kinds of reactions. Anyway, I'm not alone in this. There is a small contingent of people in the world who don't give a shit about any other character in this book except for Kevin. I also really like Dan. Dan's the team captain. I don't know what the fuck Kevin is. Dan's the team captain. She's a 5th year senior because I guess like in Division 1 schools, lots of times you don't graduate in 5 years to continue to play fucking sports. But it's really confusing why this happens at Palmetto State University because everyone's a 5th year senior. Also, why does that happen? Why is that allowed? Why are they all allowed to be super seniors? If I could go to college for a 5th year, I would. Yeah, but I like Dan. I really think she is such a strong and sympathetic leader, and she just wants to keep her team together, and she doesn't care about, you know, anybody. Like, she's just, I have a crush on her. I also really liked Aaron. He was super cool. He also was a human being who didn't like his brother, but did love him. Confusing? Yes. But I did think the way that Aaron reacted to the situations that Andrew put him in and wanting to reconnect with this brother that he never knew and supporting him was realistic and sympathetic. Those are pretty much the 2 character traits I look for in characters. Are they sympathetic and are they realistic? I thought that the general structure of the plot was pretty good also. I'm gonna trash it later, don't worry. But I do think that the general structure of the plot, where it's this kind of crime story that's ultimately driven by Exie, is really cool and really intricate, and it does come together the way I thought it was going to. I think that's awesome and really like genuinely a feat that Nora Sakavic pulled off. Some of the writing was really, really, really excellent. The best writing happens in the Exie scenes, and this I think happens because she's not worried about character motivations, she's just worried about moving the plot along, just moving through these Exie scenes. I found them extremely engaging, very easy to follow most of the time. I just, you know, just so good and fast, and really was able to trace like Neil's thoughts through the game and keep the action moving, which sometimes doesn't happen in other parts of the book. Also, unfortunately, there's some really good writing in some of the more graphic scenes, in the really graphic torture scenes, and in that one really graphic rape scene that is smack in the middle of a Raven King that caught me completely off guard, by the way. It just, like, those scenes were really, really, really well written. There's a hand job in a bathroom that happens towards the end of the Kingsman, and that is one of the only emotionally fulfilling interactions between any of the characters in this book. Anyway, who wants to hear about some bad fucking characters? The first character I hated a lot was Neil Jostin. This is ostensibly Neil's book. It is 3rd person limited, and Neil is so fucking stupid. He plays Exie, even though his mother never let him because it would draw attention to him, because he's obviously an Exie prodigy, and he's one of the people who was in like the beta testings of Exie. And his mother, when he was very young, 6 years old, like really little, stole a bunch of money from his gangster father, who's part of the Boston Mafia. He was an enforcer for the Yakuza. They never say the word Yakuza in this book. They only talk about gangsters generally. His father was an enforcer for the Yakuza. And you're like, well, that's fine. The whole thing just gets so insane. And so Neil has been on the run from his father since he's been 7 years old, but his father's been in prison for a long time. So he's actually been on the run from the Yakuza, who his father had stolen money from, and then his mother stole that money. So, you know, and Neil just loves Exie so much that when Kevin from his past days as a Little League Exie player in the beta days of Exie shows up at his high school, he's like, oh, I probably shouldn't go to Palmetto State University and play Exie alongside Kevin, because that'll probably get me killed. but he does it anyway. Literally everybody knows that Andrew has a crush on him except for Neil. Neil's the literal last person to find out. I genuinely think they're in a relationship before Neil realizes that Andrew likes him. He's also a whiner. He complains about his life being in danger constantly. He takes it out in weird passive aggressive ways on his teammates. He like doesn't make any plans for the future. He yells at Kevin for being a little whiny bitch, and then like has the exact same reaction as Kevin. Like Neil will go get up on stage and he'll mouth off to the Yakuza, and then he'll like go have a panic attack, but he'll stop having a panic attack long enough to yell at Kevin for having a panic attack about it. And Kevin's like reacting normally. He's reacting the way you would if somebody you knew mouthed off to the Yakuza. So much of Neil's narration is just devoted to bitching about Kevin. The next character I'm going to complain about is Allison, but it's not really Allison's character as much as it is a problem with characters as a whole. Allison is a character that doesn't have any personality. With the exception of Neil, Andrew, and Kevin, no character has any real personality, even Aaron, who I kind of enjoy. They all kind of are just archetypes. They don't exist as characters that interact with the story or the plot. They push it and they force it, and they're very unnatural. They don't seem like real people. They don't have any nuance. Especially Allison. I feel like Allison's whole mean rich girl act thing is weird and overdone. Very, very flat, very two-dimensional, and a lot of the characters are like that. There's also lots of characters I don't remember. Like, if you go online and you like look at like mood boards or whatever for the series, there are so many characters who like appear for like 1 second and then they've got like whole tumblers dedicated to them. They don't have any personality. I don't know what you're doing. John is another member of the Ravens team, and he's one of the characters that really suffers for this like plot furthering device that he's really kind of shoved in there towards the end of the series, and I don't know anything about him. I don't feel anything about him ever. At least Neil makes me feel uncontrollably angry. I feel like Renee is also really terrible. Not that she's like a bad person. She just exists kind of solely to bring out the humanity of Andrew, and that's hugely troubling to me. She used to be like a badass little street kid, fought people. What? She's the only one who can handle Andrew. She's gay, so like don't worry about it. They're not gonna get together. It's still bad. I'm gonna be completely honest. And now she's a Christian, and she sees the humanity in Andrew, even if nobody else can. The whole thing makes me really uncomfortable, especially since that's her real only personality trait, is to be like docile and Christian and can like, but that's just like a cover for this hard past that she's I don't understand it. None of these characters seem real. And I think part of the problem is that there's just so many characters. There's so many people on the team. You can really see that taking out one of these side characters doesn't really affect anything, since Nora Sakavic killed one of the teammates who played at the end of the first book, and then nothing changed. Allison was a little pissed for the entire time, for the entire second book, but like that didn't really change anything either. I fucking hate Andrew because he doesn't offer any catharsis, is the word I used in my last video, but I think the word I'm looking for is the opportunity to empathize. He's so fucking weird. I think the main problem with Andrew is that he's so shrouded in mystery that you can't really grab on to anything concrete about him until you've already made judgments. Like, by the time the things that would make you feel really bad for Andrew come up, you've already decided he's a psycho and he doesn't deserve your empathy. Also, what's really important is that that's not a position I hold. I don't think in real life there's anybody that we can't empathize with, and that doesn't, it's just not like a position I hold. That there's anybody who has done anything so bad that they can't ultimately be forgiven, and that forgiveness isn't necessarily on me or even my place to give, and that's a position I hold as a Christian. But like, the book makes it seem like Andrew's not in a position where he can live like a normal happy life. Like, it's completely out of the question for him, which is like a really weird position for this book to take. Second of all, his whole situation is just so ludicrous. Not like the sexual abuse he suffered, just everything after that he's allowed to play on a sports team and they just like fucking let him carry, not like everybody knows, but they don't do anything about it. Like he could and he does physically intimidate his teammates on a regular basis. I don't even know what I was saying. It's not that like Andrew being sexually abused doesn't make him a sympathetic character, it's that all of his actions preceding the revelation that he's been serially sexually abused from the time he was very young, and then killed his own mother, which I thought we already knew. Like Neil acted like it was like such a big surprise when it was like finally revealed, but I like already knew it. And that he's got like a whole host of other mental health issues that are either natural or caused by the trauma that he had when he was a kid is just, it's like, I don't know. I think what bothers me most is that Andrew doesn't want to get better at all. He doesn't seem to, not to say he doesn't seem to think it's not a possibility for him, but that he doesn't even want to consider the possibility. Like, and I don't know about that. I don't, usually care about like the message people are sending. This one's pretty bad. I think he's just so broken, so sad. His story is so sad. It completely suspends my disbelief so far that it like snaps. And I don't know what to do with a character like him. And so when he does find happiness or whatever, there's no catharsis. I can't empathize with his desire to be happy because he doesn't even seem to desire to be happy. And it's like no surprise that the main draw for these books, which is Andrew and Neil's relationship, is nothing for me because I fucking hate both of them. Their relationship is about how two of the most damaged and guarded people can open up and be vulnerable to each other, and I think that's could be really cool. Like, I think that there was a moment where they both came to this realization where they were allowed and able to be vulnerable with each other, and I think that that was a really well done moment. I think I already talked about it, it's one of the only good writing moments these books have, because of the way that their relationship ended off really uncertain, the way that Neil resolves the main conflict of the novel makes their relation, like, it just, also, Andrew has a lot of power over Neil, and that makes me really uncomfortable. I don't know, like, the whole thing just makes me really uncomfortable. Anyway, I have like one main point about the plot, and that's that it should have been one fucking book. So my main contention about this is that the ending of each book, or at least the ending of the middle book, I don't think this book has middle book syndrome either, is just, it's so arbitrary. I don't feel like there's any reason for the Raven King to pick up where it does or to end where it does. The only reason it ends where it does is because I don't think she wanted to show most of the really graphic torture that Neil goes through during his winter. I also think that the climax of the series happens in a really strange place. It happens really, really early in the third book, and to me, when I was reading it, I was really confused because it seemed that the climax of the series would be Neil's father coming back into the picture, and it happened almost immediately, and I thought it would be more seamlessly integrated into the Exy plot, but it turns out all of that stuff about Neil's father was kind of completely arbitrary. When they come back from Neil almost getting killed by his father, and then a British mafia gang comes and rescues him, and those are also his uncles, and the FBI questions them about his father and also about the Yakuza, because we cannot forget that the Yakuza is very invested in college level Exy, lest we forget. The whole thing where Neil's kidnapped by his father and then tortured and almost killed, it's man pain. It's for man pain. Trust me. I'm not one to complain about man pain. I just kind of like it when it's better integrated into the plot, where it's kind of an important part of the bigger story, and this bigger story is about the Yakuza trying to control young adults' lives through a college level Exy, which is insane, and Neil taking control back from them by beating ravens. And that's what happens. Like, that's the ultimate culmination of the story. It happens. You probably read it if you watched this video this far. But like, that's how the plot, like, that's how everything gets resolved. They defeat Rico, and Neil gets to solidify his identity as Neil, and I don't know. But the whole like gangster thing in the first half of the novel was messy. I guess my wish is that it should have been more seamlessly integrated into the larger plot instead of haphazardly revealing, I think through dialogue, that Neil's father stole the money that his mother stole from the Yakuza, and that's why Neil was sold to the Yakuza, but then his mother stole the money and Neil, and so the Yakuza's owed Neil anyway, and that whole thing's, like, that seemed very sloppily and haphazardly put together and integrated. And then when Neil's father comes back, Nathan, one of them's Nathan and the other one's Nathaniel. I don't know, I just think that a lot of these problems that I have could have been solved if she cut out like 2/3 of what happens in this book, or at least 2/3 of the words. There's not that much happens. It covers one sports season, which, by the way, no even extended season would go the entire academic year. Like, they have their first game before the fall semester starts, and they literally go until May. That's crazy. That's not how college sports work. We have to go to school. I know I go to a D3 school, but like, fucking haven't you watched March Madness? College basketball's over in fucking March. And that's in the extended season. That's in championships. Don't you know? It's not like they wouldn't practice all year, but they don't have games from August till May. What sport is this? Anyway, they defeat Rico and the plot kind of wraps up from there, but the resolution is also really messy to me. I just think that in one book there would have been less need to wrap it up as neatly as I think she wanted to. Had this impulse to do something with Rico after they defeated him. Like, that's pretty much, like, these books aren't that sophisticated. We don't really need an answer to what happens to Rico. We just need to know that he's been dethroned. And the resolution in these books is really, it's jarring for me, because I guess I was reading them up until the very end as like these stories about Neil taking back his personhood, and he was doing this not on behalf of himself but on behalf of Kevin, somebody he doesn't even really like, but he at least feels like Kevin deserves that, and also on behalf of Andrew, who is just sort of thrown in here, but like emotionally he's taking back Andrew's personhood. And they do this through their success in Exie, and that's a pretty sophisticated and compelling narrative, and it makes the characters seem three-dimensional and like you gave it some forethought. But then the resolution, it's upsetting. The most upsetting thing is that Neil kind of signs his life away to the Yakuza regardless. I just felt that up until that point, the story was about reclaiming himself and Kevin from the Yakuza, and then he went without consulting anybody. I really feel like Kevin would have preferred to die, that he just signed our lives away, and well, they can live free, but only kind of. It makes me uncomfortable that that's how the story wrapped up, and it kind of took away a lot of the personal freedom they gained when they defeated the Ravens, and what that symbolically meant for the whole league and for the individual team members. I didn't really understand a whole lot of this book, and just story-wise, I didn't really understand why the literal Yakuza was so invested in the lives, and I get, like, money, but I didn't think that any of these players were. Is the Mafia involved in college-level football and college-level basketball? Like, do they care that much? I mean, like, I guess you could scout, and I don't understand that there is this impulse to make the stakes as high as possible, and I think that's a real flaw of these books, that Nora Sakavic really thought that it would make the situations that these characters were in probably more compelling, more empathetic, more sympathetic, whatever. And it doesn't. It actually makes them the opposite, because I don't know anybody who's rocked up with the Yakuza, and I don't know anybody who enacts their trauma in such a violent, terrible way, and who has murdered, I think, multiple people. Andrew's got a body count. They're just unsympathetic and upsetting characters, and the whole thing, I guess, like, really it comes down to, like, the whole thing makes me really uncomfortable, but it makes me uncomfortable for, like, character reasons that I don't understand them. They are insane, every single one of them. They don't react the way I think that people would react. The situations that they're in are so insane that they don't feel like people, and I can't experience empathy, and I can't then apply that empathy to the outside world, so I didn't learn anything. The narrative structure of this book is fucking ridiculous. I didn't know what the main plot of the books were until the literal end, and then I was unsure about just what the story was trying to be about. I didn't know, except that on a very basic level it was about Exie. And the writing, it was all over the place. Obviously there were lots of sections that were really interesting and really compelling and well written, but there were lots of other sections where the pacing was weird, and we laid out floor plans in excruciating detail and they still didn't make any sense. And no information about emotional motivations or who characters really were. They just all felt flat, but I, would know where every character was situated, like, geographically. The whole thing was just, it was sloppy. It wasn't bad per se, it was just a little sloppy. And, I get that it's self-published, but I should still be allowed to review it. Anyway, who wants to hear about some ugly characters? You might have noticed I haven't yet spoken about Nikki. That's because I found Nikki to be ugly. He is really predatory to me. He is the only openly gay character in the team because Neil doesn't know that he's gay. And Andrew is, I guess Andrew's not closeted, but the team doesn't, know. And Nikki incessantly hits on Neil to the point where it makes Neil really uncomfortable, and Neil tells him that it makes him really uncomfortable, and Nikki continues to do it. And he's just, playing around because obviously, Nikki has, a boyfriend. But that made me really uncomfortable that in a book that is about young LGBT people, the only openly gay character is kind of predatory, and Neil's narration kind of paints him as predatory. The depiction of mental illness in this book is ugly. That's not to be mental illness isn't ugly, but it's so weird, especially the way that Andrew is just depicted. It doesn't really make any sense, the way he's medicated or the way that it's handled. And also they were yes, and also he's being abused by his doctor. I really don't have a word in my vocabulary to describe that. Oh, I did ugly. That's ugly. And then they don't really elaborate on that or deal with that at all. And there's lots of gratuitous acts of violence and regular grade violence and sexual violence. And they're never really dealt with in any satisfying way. One other thing is that Rico dies at the end of this book. These books are just confusing and they're not that good. And then Rico died, and his death to me was completely pointless. So if you understand why Rico died, I would love to fucking hear it. I don't know why Rico died. Sometimes I sit and I think about it, and I'm unsure about why he died. He was a disappointment, and it was pointless. He was already defeated, and it didn't resolve anything else. It didn't serve any purpose, and sometimes you don't have to kill characters. Okay? So these books were okay, written-wise, formatting-wise, until we got to this last fucking book. And this book is a mess. I mean, just formatting-wise, this book is a mess. It's on page 383, so if you'd like to turn to your page, open your books and turn to page 383, we can just read. It's in the second paragraph. The foxes sounded confident whenever they had a microphone in or camera their faces, and it wasn't always an act. First of all, there's a lot of problems I have with the sentence. It's a bad sentence. Second of all, microphone in or camera their faces is definitely a typo. It's definitely supposed to say microphone or camera in their faces. And that's one typo in 3 self-published books, but it's not. There appears to be 2 chapter 14s in this book. Here's a chapter 14. It's on page 265. Here on page 291, it says chapter 15. Oh, and here on page 320, it says chapter 14. And then it just continues labeling it as if this was chapter 14. So there's a lot more chapters in this book. And I don't know how this happened. Nobody looked at this book before it went to print. And somebody should have fucking looked at this book before I went to print. And while these are just 2 errors that I found, the fact that there are these 2 glaring errors makes me think that there's a lot more errors. And I understand that it's a self-published book and she doesn't have an editor or a copy editor necessarily. But that means that in a lot of places where I thought the writing was sloppy, there's actual mistakes in it. And I could never self-publish a book because I'd be so fucking worried about there being mistakes. If I reread these books, I probably could find 10 mistakes. Even considering that they're self-published, they're just 2 huge glaring errors that it just makes the whole series seem really sloppy. That's really unfortunate because the whole series isn't really sloppy, just parts of it. I know I said a lot of things seemed really sloppy, but they're still like between a 2 and a 3 star. They're not great books, but they're not like literally terrible. I'm never gonna read them again. And the characters enraged me. It's just like when I look back on it, and I look back on it knowing that there's errors like that, the whole thing seems really, really sloppy. And that's a shame, because I don't think they're as sloppy as those 2 or 3 errors that I found make it seem. And isn't that just life? Anyway, this video was very long. I hope I can get it pretty short, but thank you for watching, and I hope this one is better, at least more entertaining, if not better articulated than my first review. And I'll see you soon.